Okay, in this series let's see what is a web application, what's the main important things under a web application, and how to develop a web application. uh, there will be three important components in a web application. One thing is client, second is server, and database. Okay, we should have at least minimum understanding of these three things: what is client, what is server, and what is database. Whoever wants to access the resources on a website is called as client. In general, we will be the clients. If we want to access a Facebook, we are the clients for Facebook. If we want to access any government sites like MeSeva or anything, any website, if we want to access, we will be acting as clients. There will be n number of clients for a single server. Okay, the one who is sending us those web pages, whenever we enter the URL, we will obtain a response, means a web page. We will see a web page. If we say we want to perform login operations on Facebook, we will say www.facebook.com. Whenever we request Facebook server will give us a login page. That is the response. Okay, then what is database? Okay, when there is huge amount of data, server needs to store that information in a separate storage device at some other location. Depending upon the need, server will retrieve the stored data, okay, which is known as database. Okay, what is database? Database is used to store huge amounts of data. Whenever server wants to store any information, it will store it into the database, and depending upon the need, and let's say a client C1 wants to register into a website. Take example as Facebook only. The client wants to register in the Facebook. Client will fill the registration details and will submit. Those registration details will reach the server. Now server needs to store those details. Where it will store? It will store those details: the first name, last name, date of birth, gender, blah blah blah. There will be lot of information. All the details will be stored under database. Okay, after a few days, the client want to log in. Okay, now whenever client performs the login operation, the username and password will be submitted by him. Those details will reach the server. Now, what is the functionality of server now? The server has to check whether the client is already registered or not. If registered, the username, password submitted by the client are existing or not. So server will connect to the database and will verify the present username and password given by the client is already existing in the database or not. If exists, server will send the profile page. If those details does not match with the details stored in the database, server will send response as a failure to log in. The given username and password does not exist. Okay, these are the main things. Client will request the server will process the request. While processing the request, it may use the database. What is database? Database is used to store huge amount of data. Okay, and finally server will send a response to the client. Okay, and then generally we will enter www facebook.com. Okay, then internally what will happen is to connect to any website or anything, what is the main thing we need? We need internet. Internet means it can be of any form. It can be given by any internet service providers like Airtel, BSNL, Jio, whoever it may be. Our first client request, the URL, whenever we enter the URL, those requests will be reached to our internet service provider. Let's say in my case Airtel. Okay, it will take www.facebook.com. Internally, internal service provider will maintain a table that represents website name and its corresponding IP address. What is this IP address? Okay, in the universe, in the internet, there are lot number of machines. There can be n number of servers. There can be Facebook server, Orkut server, SBI bank server, any servers. How to identify a particular server or a particular kind? We need IP address. Just like we have an Aadhaar number in India or a social service number in US, each and every machine will have an IP address so that we can uniquely identify them. Okay, each and every IP address will be mapped with a domain address. Whenever we enter this domain address, it will be converted to corresponding IP address. Based upon this IP address, the request will be redirected to corresponding server. Okay, let's see with an example. See this. See, whenever we enter www.facebook.com, our request will be redirected to this IP address. Either we can give the domain address or IP address, it will be redirected to corresponding website. Who will convert this domain to IP address? Our internet service provider. Okay, so that we can communicate with the server. Server will process the request and will send the response. This is the basic things about a web application. Later on we will see what are the some other important things involved in this. Okay, let's end this.